Hello everyone, this is Reed Riggs offering a careful ramble about the idea of dumbing down a curriculum in order to reach proficiency targets or proficiency goals in general. And I think what often happens when we come from a textbook curriculum where we have very explicitly mapped out for us, where we see words and lists, grammar and lists, and we have our goals, the students see those as goals. And as teachers, we see those as goals. We say, that's what we need to cover. Those are the goals. Students have to learn the words. And then as we dabble and try out new teaching methods, we'll say, oh, it's through communication. Oh, it's through input. Now we can teach these lists of words even more effectively. But then, if we're really talking about proficiency, then it can't be measured in which lists of words. Even if you took natural recordings of students talking in the classroom, outside the classroom, and you ran it through a frequency counter and you could measure how many times they said each word, that list of isolated words doesn't show you the quality of its use, like the contexts in which they used it and how effective they were at achieving whatever goals. So it's really through can-do statements that we can start to measure proficiency. Performance specifically, proficiency is so much bigger. Something like an OPI is going to stretch, an oral proficiency interview is going to stretch students to find their ceilings, find what they can't do, and push them so hard in talking about a variety of different topics. That's not something we aim to do in a classroom. It's also not something that needs to happen in any real life situation where each situation is specific. If I'm ordering food, I just have to order food. A restaurant isn't going to push me in a lot of different topic areas. So each thing we do, we're really talking about just performance. How can you perform? And can-do statements can capture this. So if we're just working on can-do statements and not at all focusing on any specific list of words, which is how I teach, ideally, when I can, I teach this way. If all of the words that come up are words that we've seen before in other contexts, then in my view, the learning is just seeing which words can be used in this new context. So we're learning context. If no new words come up and we're able to accomplish our can-do statements or our can-do performances, like I can order food, or I can tell a story about something that happened to me yesterday, I can share my opinion about certain weekend possibilities. Could be any sort of use of the language, but for a specific purpose, a specific kind of topic or task. Whatever words we need are the words we need. And so the question is, well, what if you get through 4 years of doing that, and compared to a textbook, there are words and grammar that just never came up? So, are we going easy now? Are we dumbing down the curriculum when really there were so many other words that would have been covered in a textbook-based curriculum? And I'd like to compare this to a swim class where if you're just working on, certain time goals, can you swim a certain number of laps in a certain amount of time? Well, what if during that time you could have taught about all the possible ways to design a swimming pool, and the students are missing out on that? And what if you could have spent all that time teaching all the different muscles that are engaged and the chemical processes your body goes through in order to engage with each muscle, in order to activate each muscle when swimming? The students aren't learning that. If that's a goal, then I guess that could be like a swimming appreciation class or a swimming science class, maybe an exercise science class. That's fine, but a swim class is really focused on your ability to swim, and we come up with measures to measure progress in that, such as how many laps, how fast, and there are qualities too. Your instructor might point out to you, oh, if you turn your body this way, move your arm in this way, hold your hand in this direction, it'll improve your swimming. But again, it's measured in some kind of measurable, convenient to measure way, such as number of laps or time of swimming. So can-do statements work like that for language, where we're saying, okay, can you describe a picture of people in a variety of weather disasters that are common to a certain area of the world. So we'll get a bunch of pictures together. As you describe each picture, you start to recycle more and more words. I'm doing this with my students right now, and flood keeps coming up because I have a lot of pictures of floods. So the word flood gets repeated a lot. I'm not trying to avoid the word flood. I'm also not targeting the word flood. It just naturally comes up. This one student asked, how do I say dangerous? So I wrote it on the board, 危险, in Chinese, Mandarin. And so then we were reading a text, a news article shortly after about a flood, and the word 危险 came up, dangerous. And I said, I didn't plan this, it just naturally came up. And words that don't come up as frequent, that's fine. It means we didn't need them as much. And so frequency sorts itself out. The words that we see more often, they come up because we needed them more to talk about things that we wanted to talk about, to share ideas, to describe pictures, to accomplish whatever tasks, to develop whatever topics. So the idea of dumbing down the curriculum, I would want to measure at the end of 4 years. If you covered all that vocab and you covered all that grammar, the downside that I always see is that as you focus on each new list, you squeeze out any space for the students to continue using anything they've learned before. And so you're constantly driving out opportunities to continue building repertoires, continue using whatever was taught. And so you force it into disuse. And so by the time they get to the 4th year, you'll ask them something like, 他喜欢吃什么? Simple questions like that. What does he like to eat? And a lot of my students, I've seen this firsthand as a teacher, they'll say, I don't understand. And then I'll translate, or we'll work our way towards meaning. But then a student will turn to another student and say, we already learned that the first year. And so then that's it turns into a kind of rejection where they're saying, like, what are we supposed to be learning right now? Why are we covering old stuff? So students will treat it as, like, you covered it, it's finished. You covered the new list, it's finished. You covered the new list, it's finished. So by the time they get to the 4th year, there's no proficiency to be measured because proficiency was never the goal, and they haven't continued using anything they've learned before. So it's largely forgotten. Most of it's forgotten. So I would say if the way you're covering all that stuff does result in their ability to continue using it, then that's awesome, and we'll look at that. I just have never seen that, and it makes sense why I've never seen it. It's the proficiency-based ones, proficiency-based types of teaching, where whether it's through students naturally working on tasks or students naturally building stories together with the teacher, with each other, writing stories, writing about their weekend, writing essays, writing their own news reports, whatever, as long as it's focused, we say focused on meaning, more specifically focused on some kind of topic, completing some kind of task, working on a project, if they're using the language to work on the project. All of these things should naturally result in words being naturally recycled. And so they get real strong with certain words. And in the end, the goal is that the frequency of word usage inside the classroom should resemble frequency of word usage outside the classroom. So when they get outside the classroom, maybe they visit Chinatown, maybe they travel, that they meet a person speaking Chinese, and they're familiar with the common words that come up because those words commonly came up in the classroom. When I ask my students, 可以吗? And they say, we don't know what that is. And they say, oh, I think we learned that once. Like, we learned that a couple years ago. We learned that once. That doesn't at all match the frequency of usage of normal speech outside the classroom. And a frequency dictionary can show that. I have students asking, what does duh mean? How do I use duh? Duh on a frequency dictionary is the first most frequent used word. Like, that's the most commonly used little grammar particle. And so if it's not being as frequently used in the classroom relative to the frequency of other words being used in the classroom, then I'd say there's a problem. So are we dumbing down the curriculum? Yeah, compared to something that I don't often see lead to proficiency, yes, because the goal is change to proficiency. And so we're naturally using whatever words are needed, which are going to be a lot of different words, but also not necessarily always constantly new words. So yeah, it'd be neat to animate this as a list over time that sort of populates different words into a, based on frequency, really kind of flash and highlight as new words are added and other words are strengthened by getting more bold or brighter, have a little bar next to them. I don't know. But it wouldn't look like the coverage of lists where we say that list is done, let's go on to the new list, that list is done, let's go on to the new list. So it's a weird measure to say we're dumbing it down. That's my main point. So if we're growing in proficiency, then that should be the goal. Covering lists should not be the goal. I think dumbing it down is the wrong way to think about it. Okay, those are my opinions. Thanks for listening. Happy to hear any comments.